Hello and welcome everyone to the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. There are many myths out there about the cloud. One is that it's super easy and all you have to do is just lift and shift your applications into it like magic and everything works great. But hopefully most of you know that there's probably more to it than that. There's more that you need to know. There's a lot of myths out there that you may or may not have heard. And today we'll be dispelling many of those myths. We'll be providing answers to real world cloud challenges. And we'll be talking to cloud solutions experts, as well as a real IT practitioner who has migrated and used the cloud for production and who has found all the pitfalls and has some best practice advice to offer us. Today's event is presented in partnership with our friends at Rubrik and AWS. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as the moderator today. We want this to be educational. We encourage your questions. I know many of you are dealing with challenges around migrating to the cloud, and so hopefully this is a great opportunity for you to get answers to those challenges and questions that you have. We encourage you to use the questions pane there in your audience console. I see that many of you have already found that and said hello or good morning or good afternoon. And we love to see that, but we also want to hear about your questions on today's topic of cloud migration. Again, we have experts from AWS and Rubrik on, so this is a great place to get those questions answered. This is going to be a fun video panel discussion. And I also want to point out before we kick it off that there are a number of handouts available there for download in your audience console, specifically on the Rubrik for AWS solution, and also some things that you should know if you feel compelled to go to the cloud. At the end of the event today, I'll be announcing the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card door prize. If you're watching this on demand, of course, that drawing would have already occurred. And you should know that the legal prize terms and conditions are available there in the handouts tab. And then I mentioned that we encourage your questions, and we do. We have an additional Amazon $50 gift card for our best question prize winner. Of course, you have to submit a question to be eligible for the prize drawing and also meet the Actual Tech Media prize policy. All right, so with that, I'm excited now to bring in today's two expert panelists. Welcome Mr. Jake Burns, Enterprise Strategist at AWS, and our special guest, Paul Gonzalez, Director of IT at the Olympic Club. Paul and Jake, it's great to have you on the event. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Excellent. All right. Well, before we get started, I guess I should just say, it's time to kick it off. It's time to talk about the many myths around the cloud and see which ones of those, we can dispel in our discussion today. We've got a few questions here, a few points to talk about. And like I mentioned, we'll be taking questions from the audience as well as they come in. So, the first question, we'll just start off at the high level, and that is simply why cloud? Paul, I'll first hand it off to you. Why did you look at cloud, and why are you leveraging cloud in your company there at the Olympic Club?
Yeah, some of the obvious benefits to moving to a cloud platform would be speed, agility, flexibility that you get from a on-demand consumption-based product like AWS versus trying to build out your own infrastructure on-prem, hardware procurement delays. As we know, there's a chip shortage going on worldwide, globally. And so some of the advantages is that real speed and flexibility, or then just be able to consume a wide variety of services in an a la carte fashion, pay as you go. And then also being able to take advantage of some of the natural built-in security tools that a cloud provider like AWS would provide for you to utilize.
Absolutely, yeah. And so, Jake, what are the benefits that you're seeing and maybe some of the misconceptions as well around cloud?
Yeah, I don't know where to begin with the misconceptions, but I'll try with just a kind of a general definition. I think cloud is a lot of things. Cloud is the ability to take advantage of a mature set of services that have been developed already, and many companies are already using. So things across many different categories like compute, storage, machine learning, blockchain, pretty much everything that IT and technology uses. We develop. And so being able to take advantage of that and being able to use that from day one rather than have to develop it yourself. But, also, like Paul said, the pay for consumption model is something I think that doesn't get talked about enough. It's the ability to have capacity on demand. So it's kind of like an analogy would be, the electric company. So rather than building your own power plant and having to guess as to what capacity you're going to need and usually being wrong, either paying too much or not having enough that you need, you're able to have near infinite resources available when you need it and only pay for what you use. And so this allows businesses to scale both up and down so that they could fulfill their customer needs better. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions around it. And I'm sure we'll kind of get into some of the details later, but cloud is not it's not a silver bullet, I would say is the biggest one. Just by adopting cloud, you don't automatically get a lot of the benefits. You have to understand what the cloud is, understand best practices, get your staff trained. And once you do that, though, the benefits are, they're radical. They're game changing for most businesses.
Absolutely. I mean, that elasticity, that scalability, that agility that the cloud brings is just incredible. But you make a great point there that you have to leverage it, intelligently, and make smart decisions around the cloud. Let's go ahead and bring up a couple of polls. Actually, first poll now for everyone out there in the audience. We're going to have a series of polls here while we continue our discussion. And the first question on the screen here is, why are you interested in moving to the cloud? Is it, that it's faster, cheaper, scalable, agile? What is it? And let's see, I'll throw it back to you, Paul. I mean, have you seen any sort of patterns or practices that have really impeded the realization of the benefits of the cloud, whether they're kind of technical challenges or organizational challenges?
Yeah, great. So just looking at the poll, it seems like a lot of folks are really interested in the scalability of the cloud, which is great. So I'll just touch base on that to begin with. And, it is true, you do get a lot of scalability with the cloud. However, you really have to understand fundamentally how your applications are built to really achieve and utilize full scalability. And one of the misconceptions is, if I lift and shift or do a migration to the cloud for a single application, I automatically get that scalability, which isn't always the case. Especially if you have monolithic applications, it's very hard to scale those. You can definitely, add more CPU, memory, networking capacity, whatever you want to take full advantage of scalability in the cloud. You really need to think about the next steps into, small refactoring of that application.
Absolutely. Jake, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. I do think, though, that there are some ways that you can scale monolithic applications. Obviously vertically, right? So you can add, like you said, more CPUs and memory. Again, you could add it both. You can increase and both decrease it as you need it. Now, if you are scaling horizontally, which is you're kind of inferring like if you refactor and you do it kind of the cloud way, then that makes it a lot easier, and you can automate that and get much better results. But even just lifting and shifting monolithic applications, I think if you understand how to operate in the cloud and you are willing to kind of train your teams in a way where they understand what they're doing, you can still get some degree of flexibility and scalability with your monolithic applications. And I think that's especially true in AWS with block storage. With instances, with compute, there's still like a reboot to change instance types. So like a brief maintenance window would be required unless, you have a load balancer configuration where you can get around that. But with storage, it's really awesome the way that our block storage works nowadays. And this wasn't the case when I was a customer, by the way. It's gotten a lot better. But you can dynamically increase and decrease storage volumes, and you can automate that. So you could be changing that every minute if you wanted to. But you could also do that with your your performance. So what we call provisioned IOPS in AWS. So how much performance you want and how much you want to pay. So like the higher performant types of storage will cost more, and the lower performant will cost less. So as you, if you have a bursty workload, for example, if we just use an example of like an enterprise with an ERP system where they're doing month-end close at the end of the month, you can increase the performance automatically on those volumes in anticipation of that burst, and only pay for that higher performance during that day or two that you need it, and then scale it back automatically. So that's with like a very legacy ERP system. But of course, if you refactor it and monetize it, you could take that even many steps further.
Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting. Something that a lot of folks might not think about. Even with legacy applications, there's still, many benefits to consider. And so it looks like here on the poll, like Paul said, scalability is kind of winning out. Let me share the results with everyone out there. And 64% said scalability is what they're most after. 46% said agility. And now the real question, what's the real reason that you're moving to the cloud? Is it that your boss told you that you had to, or is it simply because everybody's doing it? Maybe your CEO saw an ad in the Wall Street Journal that said, move to the cloud and, pay pennies, and everybody needs to do it. So I'm curious to see the results of this. Paul, I'm curious, why did you all leverage the cloud? What was the big benefit that you were after?
Yeah, I think it's the last one. Everybody's doing it. You don't want to feel like the only person left out of the room in the organization that wasn't trying to utilize cloud. But the real reason folks are utilizing cloud is really that scalability aspect of it. Jake mentioned, how you do it in a monolithic application, but there's also advantages of thinking about how you can use cloud if you have a greenfield application as well. Really trying to utilize, scaling vertically and horizontally. But really, the trend in IT and technology is everybody's doing it. You don't want to feel left behind because technology is always changing. But there's really real reasons for it that we just talked about earlier about scalability, agility. High availability is a good one. Spreading your workloads across multiple availability zones to achieve that high availability, or even being able to geographically disperse that application between different regions within the United States. Get your end users closer to the products and services that you're trying to provide. So the cloud is just one of those things where you can almost do anything with it. You just got to learn how to use it in the most effective and meaningful way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you make great points there. The scalability. I mean, I know a lot of companies even are after the OpEx model. I mean, maybe they have an aging data center that needs new, AC units. It needs remodeling. It needs a generator. It doesn't have, of course, multiple points of, network access like a data center in the cloud would have. And they're considering, the CapEx expenses to improve that data center versus the OpEx model, that you can gain by the cloud. So certainly everybody's doing it is the winner here on this poll, but we know that there's real reasons, behind that. There's real reasons that everybody's doing it. All right, excellent. So let's move on now to our next question, and that is adoption of the cloud. Looking for, either organizational or technical advice. I know, Paul, you mentioned, you got to learn how to leverage the cloud intelligently. Any advice for folks who are considering cloud adoption, either organizational advice, things to do in the organization to leverage it intelligently, or technical?
Yeah. So from an organizational perspective, I think in order to be successful, you really have to think hard as to, why you want to leverage the cloud, right? Are you doing it to speed up your development processes, your services, right? You're trying to achieve some sort of competitive advantage and to be first to market, where, you mentioned an existing on-prem data center, or even a colo data center could be very legacy in terms of speed and agility, right? So from an organizational perspective, it's really up upon your management team and how you want to educate them to move to the cloud, and really shifting from that, capital expense to an OpEx model, right? Where you can really think about, not having to leverage large investments and time to do that, and just consume it at the tip of your fingers. And then from a technical perspective, one of the things is, start small. We know that change is difficult, it can be scary, and one of the best things you can do from yourself from a technical perspective is, take a small application that you might use on-prem and spin it up in test dev in the cloud and play around with it and really learn and build those skill sets with using an AWS platform versus, maybe traditionally using a VMware, type of environment, Hyper-V on-prem. So a lot of I would say that the technology is familiar, but also is also quite different as well.
Yeah, great advice. I mean, I'm old enough, unfortunately, to remember the days of trying to convince folks to use virtualization in the on-prem data center, and it was kind of the same process there. Look for the low-hanging fruit, the easy applications, convince everyone of the benefits, and get comfortable with it in the organization. Jake, what has been your best advice you've seen out there for folks who are considering migrating to the cloud?
Yeah, I'll echo what Paul said. I completely agree with that. I'm a huge advocate of, in the very beginning of a migration, to string together some small wins, get that momentum going. Momentum could be your friend or your enemy in one of these kind of transformations. So it's good to kind of get going in the right direction as quickly as possible, for a lot of reasons. But really, you want the confidence in the people who are doing the work. They can feel confident that they're doing it, but also the other stakeholders within the organization. Every organization, almost every organization, they'll have some naysayers, right? You don't want to give them any ammunition, any doubt. So pick the easy things first. Start small. Obviously you're gonna go big, but you start small just to get that momentum going. But I think another really important aspect to this, and I'm focused really on the organizational side because I think that's where most customers are finding a challenge. Really take the time in the beginning to get buy-in from your team and from your peers. If you're leading one of these migration or transformation efforts, tell them why you're doing it. Give them a meaning behind what you're doing, and then share with them what's the plan, even if it's not fully developed. Just knowing that there's a plan in place and can give people confidence that this could work. Design incentives. Reward people for getting certified, taking the training, and create opportunities for everybody within the organization. Back when I was a customer, I was surprised by some of the people that were meaningful contributors to the all-in migration that we did. Some of the people didn't surprise me. They were already high performers, but other people, they just needed an opportunity and a mission. And once they were given that, and they were given the training and they were encouraged, we saw people that really were kind of, I would say, if we were being honest, just kind of punching a clock before, but during this transformation got really passionate and got really involved because they were given that opportunity and they were incentivized to take advantage of it.
I think that's excellent advice. What about executive buy-in? I mean, certainly I think you need executives to buy in to this idea, but it shouldn't be an executive mandate, like pushed down and forced into the IT organization. What do you think, Jake?
Well, in my case, it was a mandate, so I'm not against that. As long as, like I said, the why is understood, and it's done in such a way where somebody in leadership needs to explain to everyone who needs to be convinced why we're doing this and how they're going to benefit from it. So, for me, like I took my infrastructure team and I turned them into a cloud services team. One of the first things we did was change the name. And then the second thing we did was training and then certification. And then the last thing we did was actually, before the training was over, we started migrating because, and this is kind of a cheat code for those out there. I know it's a lot to ask of folks to start a migration while you're still doing training, but there's something magical about learning and doing that very same day, and not just doing it in a lab, but actually doing it for real. That really gets people that learning to stick. So I don't think a top-down mandate is necessary. I do think that there needs to be a clear leader who sets some constraints, so deadline and budget and all of that, and designs a system where the people involved understand what's in it for them and are incentivized to participate.
I like that. I like the cheat codes, and I like the incentive idea as well. I think that could be really powerful for folks. Sometimes people just need an incentive and an opportunity, like you said, to improve their skills and make a meaningful change, in the organization. So really cool. Thank you for sharing that. We have a poll question up here on the screen, and it looks like most folks out there have already responded to it. So let me share the results. And it's almost a 50-50 split between organizational and technical concerns, slightly higher on the technical concerns. Paul, what do you think? What would be your greatest concern?
Yeah, I think my greatest concern would be at an organizational level. I like the way that Jake touched upon, how can it benefit others within the organization? As technologists, we kind of understand that inherent benefit of moving to the cloud for all the things, agility, speed, security. But what's in it for other department heads and other functional parts of the business, right? Marketing, sales, and so if you can kind of figure out a way to communicate some of those benefits from a sales perspective or a marketing perspective, like, hey, we can do all sorts of campaigning, we can get data, we can get it really quick, we can leverage the cloud. Then you start to get buy-in from different other areas of an organization, which can help you on that kind of digital transformation, cloud transformation journey. And then going back on the technical side, one of the things that my team has learned is that not everything in the cloud is available that you may be typically used to in an on-prem system. One of the things that comes to mind is relational databases. So when you have a relational database on-prem, you have full access to security policies and postures and the ability to go and tweak all sorts of settings. But when you move to a service like RDS in AWS, you kind of lose some of those benefits to make all those fine-tune adjustments. So you just have to realize from a technical perspective and do some soul searching as to, what are you really doing from a database perspective, and is everything that I can do today available if I move to something like an RDS type service? And if not, maybe your first goal is to spin up your own instance and install your database service versus using something like RDS.
Okay, good point. Yeah, talking about the trade-offs, I like that. Always be aware of the trade-offs, pros and cons. So let's move on now to our next question, talking about cloud service models, specifically infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, and then you have the hybrid versus multi-cloud, question as well. And I'm just going to go ahead and pop up the poll right now before we start chatting. The poll is, which of these cloud service models are you currently using or are you most interested in using? Paul, what about you? Which cloud service model have you leveraged and why?
I've leveraged more of the infrastructure as a service and also software as a service models. Not so much PaaS in my experience, even though I do know some of the benefits of PaaS. But everybody's first instinct when they move to cloud is infrastructure, right? Servers, networking, storage, anything that comes along with that. And then SaaS is it's the easy approach, right? I consume Office 365, email as a service. I can get CRM through Salesforce. So I think folks are a lot familiar with SaaS and how they can consume that. And then, when they start looking at flexibility and capabilities, they really start to leverage the power of infrastructure as a service and consuming that on an ad hoc basis.
Okay. And then Jake, when you talk to AWS, customers out there, how do you help them choose between the different types of cloud service models?
Yeah, I think it depends on the type of business. This is one case where that's definitely true. Enterprises, large organizations are typically going to favor SaaS and then fall back on infrastructure as a service if they need to. And usually they're going to do some form of a lift and shift or what I call a minimal viable refactor to get those legacy applications to the cloud. So it's usually going to be, I'm not surprised to see SaaS number one and IaaS is number two. PaaS usually, the platform as a service is usually more of an advanced type of thing that smaller companies and technology organizations utilize. This is where you kind of really get the true power of the cloud, I think, in developing your own applications and taking advantages of those advanced services, infrastructure as code and all of that other stuff. So I think it depends on your organization. For most enterprises, though, SaaS is going to be the number one choice because, like Paul said, it's the easiest, and we have great partners like Rubrik that have great SaaS solutions, and we offer in the AWS marketplace, thousands and thousands of solutions that our partners provide that you can use as in a SaaS model with the click of a button. So that's usually the preference for enterprises. Although most of the help that we provide for customers is with the infrastructure.
Got it. Okay. And I just shared the poll results, and I think to no one's surprise, 79% said SaaS is the model they're using. I mean, everyone uses some sort of SaaS application. Let's talk now about the hybrid versus multi-cloud question as well. And so I'll bring up that poll as well that says, which cloud model are you planning to use or currently use? Hybrid, hybrid and multi, or predominant / single cloud provider? Jake, maybe you can just share with us your definition of multi-cloud.
Yeah, so I hear this a lot. I hear the debate, multi-cloud or not multi-cloud debate a lot, and I think it kind of misses the point to some extent. And it all, I think, comes down to definitions. I found that so many people have a different definition of what multi-cloud actually means. I use a very kind of loose definition of multi-cloud, and I do that for a very specific reason. I'll tell you why. I like to get away from this, should we do multi-cloud, should we not do multi-cloud debate, and say, let's be honest that everybody's going to be multi-cloud at some point, right? And probably you are today. But my definition of multi-cloud includes having a predominant cloud provider like AWS for the majority of your workloads, and then choosing specific other providers like Rubrik, for example, like Salesforce, like Okta, these to solve very specific solutions that work best for you. What doesn't tend to work is when companies decide to split their workloads across multiple providers. It's kind of like a procurement way of thinking, where we're going to try to get the best pricing by having a competitor in there, or we want to not put all eggs in one basket. But there's so many challenges with that approach. It's something that I tried personally when I was a customer and had to back out of. And the main reasons were, we tend to underestimate how much of a difference there is between different cloud providers in terms of the skills needed to use them. And so it's enough of a challenge to get a highly skilled team on one platform. But if you want to get them skilled on multiple platforms, you're kind of faced with this dilemma of, do you have two teams and double your headcount? Or do you try to get everyone to speak, another language and be multilingual, which is a lot to ask. It's fairly complex, those difficulties. So if you do pull that off, then retaining them is going to be even more of a challenge as well. The second thing is, where is your data going to live? So if your data lives in one cloud provider and you're replicating it to another, there's going to be latency issues and there's going to be costs associated with that. And those costs can add up very quickly. So my advice is let's stop talking about multi-cloud versus no multi-cloud. Let's talk about what are the ways that companies are implementing multi-cloud that actually works for them and achieves their goal. And I think the predominant cloud provider strategy with kind of an intelligent strategy around kind of where we're going to make exceptions and trying to minimize those exceptions, that's the strategy that worked for me and works for most customers that I work with.
Yeah, very interesting. I like that. And Paul, I'm curious, what cloud service model have you adopted and why?
Yeah, I really like Jake and the way he described it, because the definitions are very loose, and these motion sensor lights. But the method that we've chosen, and we've done it without even knowing it, is sticking with a predominant cloud provider like AWS, right? And then anything that we can't figure out how to do with AWS, start looking at alternative products and solutions like a SaaS provider. And so I've done that in many organizations, and I felt that's the best approach, because as you mentioned, you don't want to run different teams that are familiar with different types of clouds, AWS, Azure, whatever cloud provider you want to choose, just for the sake of trying to save a buck, right? And trying to run workloads based on cost. Not only does it increase your complexity, but then you start to have cloud sprawl, similar to how back in the day we had VM sprawl, where everybody's spinning up VMs and we're not sure, what they're doing, and whatnot. And you just have to be aware of that.
Yeah, great advice. I mean, we talked about the training and kind of the ramp up and certification, process to get the staff comfortable with the cloud. And, being a former IT manager myself, I can just see the impossible challenge of really trying to train the staff on multiple clouds and get them comfortable and familiar with multiple cloud solutions. So I think that's a smart approach, to focus on a single cloud provider, and then, like you said, layer on SaaS applications just where it makes sense for the company and for the IT organization. So let me share the results of this poll, and 43% said hybrid. Jake, what's your take on hybrid? I mean, or even what's the definition of hybrid from your perspective?
Yeah, I find that people kind of get multi-cloud and hybrid cloud kind of mixed up sometimes, and that's completely understandable. We have a lot of new terms that people have to learn. So my definition of hybrid would be having some of your environment in the cloud and some of it on your premises. So everybody's going to be in a hybrid state, at least temporarily. Even if you go all in, like we did, you're going to be hybrid during the period of time that you're migrating. Most customers are going to be hybrid for a longer period of time because they choose not to go all in, at least initially. There's definitely big advantages to going all in. There's also challenges around it. The advantages are, once you migrate that last application to the cloud, you've really eliminated all of that baggage that you need, even if you just have one application running on premises. If you have even one application in your data center, you need a data center. And you need everything associated with it. There's power costs, there's cooling costs, there's staffing, there's hardware refreshes, there's support contracts, there's all of these things, capacity planning. So even if you got 99% of the way there, it's really worth it to get that last 1% because there's this huge benefit that you get in reducing complexity and reducing cost once you do that, and then allows you to focus on your workloads in the cloud, which is where your business is going to be running and what's going to cause your business to be successful. All those benefits that you're getting in the cloud. But that being said, most customers are hybrid, and there are approaches to make that work. Although I think that for the vast majority of customers, it should be a temporary solution.
Got it. Okay, good points. All right, let's move on and let's talk a little bit more now about the actual migration and specific applications. Starting off with just which applications should you move first? Paul, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think we touched base about it just a little bit earlier on in the conversation, but it's all about the small wins and the low-hanging fruit, right? Nail those, gain momentum, start with the legacy applications, and then there's still going to be some natural benefit to that to be able to scale those applications in one way versus scaling horizontally. So start small, get the win, get comfortable, get your team up to speed, get them comfortable, and then carry that momentum forward and tackle some of the maybe larger applications, or start to do a little bit of refactoring and start to think about how to monetize those applications in the cloud.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, different companies have different scenarios, of course. So there's always a lot of, kind of, it depends. Like maybe there's a greenfield application, or maybe
Right.
there's an application that's running on some infrastructure that's out of date, and it just makes more sense to move it, to the cloud. Jake, what about you? What's your take on application rationalization?
I think this is a great topic because what most customers find, and this was certainly the case for me, is that this is an opportunity to kind of understand what applications you have, what's needed and what's not needed. There's an interesting phenomenon that I'd like to discuss just briefly here that's related to this. Why cost savings is possible in the cloud. It's really about utilization because we're in a pay for consumption model. But if you think about it, like back in the data center, when you're in the data center, you're not really worried about unused capacity, because obviously you want to avoid it, but it's kind of a mistake that's already been made. We purchased too much capacity, or our capacity requirements changed, right? And we can't really get rid of that hardware. So it might not even be worth turning it off, because the power cost might be nominal compared to the big initial spend that you made, right? And who knows, you may need it later. So our behavior is that we don't go looking for efficiency to a high degree in our data center. We just kind of accept the way it is. Mistakes were made. We'll buy new hardware if we need it, and that's just what we have to live with. But moving to the cloud, it requires a different way of thinking. So this migration period, when you're moving, is a great opportunity to kind of look at your app portfolio, decide what's really needed and what isn't. And I think most customers find, this was certainly the case for me, that there are applications that are no longer needed, whole applications that you could just decommission. And maybe you only need a small functionality, you could build that in the cloud, or maybe you don't need any of the functionality. Or maybe somebody's using it and you're just not getting the value out of it that it's worth for how much you're going to pay for it. So it's a great opportunity to kind of trim down that list of your app portfolio, make it easier to manage and make it lower cost. But, in terms of migrating, I'm with Paul on this. You want to start with the easy ones, because building that momentum is super important. We talk about being okay with failure, but it's okay to fail except when it isn't. And I would say that in the beginning of a transformation, that's not the time to fail, because all eyes are on you. Everyone's wondering, is this going to work? Is this a good idea? And so it's a successful pattern to pick the ones that you could be successful with, and the applications that you can kind of over deliver the results on when you move to cloud, and just make sure that your stakeholders, your customers, and everybody is delighted and happy with the result of that, especially in those first few steps. And then once you get to the difficult ones, people will understand, because they know they could see the benefits. You have a good track record. They know that this is going to be successful, and you get a little bit more leeway. And also your teams are more experienced by the time you get to those more complex ones. So there's a lot of reasons to start small and end big with the migration.
Well said. Well said. Let me bring up this poll question. And the question here is, which of these are or will be your primary cloud workloads? I'll leave that out there for everyone to answer while we continue chatting here. And I want to also ask about, new applications. Let's say that you need a new, I don't know, take an ERP or something like that. How do you choose where to run that application? And in what form, I guess I should say. Maybe it's available as a SaaS, maybe it's available as a, on-premises installation, or you could run that in the cloud. How do you choose the best option? Paul, what do you do at your organization?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think it's going to be, one of those, it depends and how you want to do it. For us, in my experience, when we're thinking about application, you got to figure out, okay, is it available as a SaaS product? If it is, why should I spend the time and money to try to build it myself and run it in the cloud when I can just consume it as a SaaS type product? If there's good reason to build it on your own, one of the things that oftentimes gets overlooked is, what is the supportability of the application in the cloud, and what type of architecture is it going to be supported in? Because the last thing you want to do is build something in the cloud, and then all of a sudden you have an uh-oh moment where you need help, and you haven't really looked at the architecture and what's the supportability of the product and how it should be built and designed in the cloud. So just be aware of that pitfall when you're thinking about that.
Yeah, good point. Good point. The supportability is always something we really need to take into account. Jake, what about you? What's your perspective on new applications?
Yeah, I think I can't really think of a scenario where I'd want to build something in a data center nowadays. I know maybe there's some edge cases out there where it makes sense, but for the most part, customers are building in the cloud just because it's so much easier. Like I said in the beginning of our conversation, one of the benefits of the cloud is getting access to just a rich set of services that are ready to use on day one. I mean, hour one, really. You can create an account in AWS if you don't have one right now and get started in 10 minutes. Put your credit card in and just build something, right? So it's super easy to do that. So really, and it's what we call at Amazon a two-way door. It's a reversible decision. So unlike building on-prem, you don't really have to live with the results. What this does is it encourages experimentation, because you can having the ability to shut things off and stop paying for them makes you more bold in what you try and what you what you experiment with. And it's those experimentations that lead to innovation. That kind of holy grail that everyone's looking for is innovation. Well, innovation comes from experimentation. Experimentation comes from lowering the cost of failure, and cloud is what lowers that cost of failure. It allows you to experiment just in a way that was just never possible before. So I'm obviously a fan of building in the cloud, but I'm also a fan of moving legacy workloads to the cloud. And I think that doesn't get enough attention as well. The benefits of moving legacy workloads, they're real. And one of the benefits is once you have it in the cloud, you have all of those services available to you and that pay for consumption model to experiment on those legacy applications with refactoring, whether you want to do it a little bit at a time or all at once. It allows you to experiment with those as well, almost to the same degree as building a new one. So I think either way, moving to the cloud is virtually always the right choice.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's what's made AWS to me so successful, is just that innovation and that ability to fail and that ease of getting started. Um, and you make a great point there about legacy applications. I think too many companies, they think they have to refactor and they think moving to the cloud is going to be really hard. But you make a great point. You can take a legacy application running on Windows Server and move it into AWS. It doesn't have to be difficult. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. In fact, if it's difficult, then call us because we can help. It shouldn't be difficult. There are some applications that are more difficult than others. I think from a technical perspective, there really should be no challenges at this point. We have so many great examples nowadays. Nowadays, it's really the best time ever in history to be moving to the cloud. I did it in 2015, 2016. This is like the stone age of cloud. Today, if you're getting started, you have so many advantages. Not only the fact that the services are more mature and cost less, because at least at AWS, the cost of services go down over time. But you also have so many great examples of what success looks like. So many customers have done this successfully and are willing to talk about it. And we have so many reference architectures. I think the technical piece has been sorted out many times over. So if you're having difficulty with that, please reach out to us. We will be more than happy to help you, connect you with customers who've done it before, show you real life examples of how to do it. In my experience, most of the challenges are around the organizational elements. And that's just really getting buy-in from people, which, like I said before, is really just taking the time to explain what's in it for them. What I didn't get to say earlier about that was, for me, when I was going through this, my team saw this as a threat, and I think this is true for a lot of companies, a lot of technical teams, because they've spent their whole career operating in the data center and managing hardware and all of that. And now you're taking that away from them. So if you do that, you have to be very careful to explain to them what it's being replaced with and why it's better, not just for the company, but for them as well. And I think it's potentially a game changer more for individuals, for IT workers, than it is for companies, believe it or not, because this is transforming people's careers. If you can go from a somewhat dead-end job managing infrastructure to a cloud engineer with a whole new career path that could go many different ways, architect, data science, so many different great places that you can go in the cloud, and being closer to the business and actually solving the business's problems rather than racking and stacking servers and not knowing why you're doing it. And in some cases, there's no reason why you're doing it if you actually trace it back. So this is really transforming careers. And so explaining that to your team is going to get you past many of those organizational challenges and the technical challenges. Like I said, let us help you solve that. We have a lot of great partners, Rubrik being one of them, that also can help solve those problems. So we have a great ecosystem out there to support you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I mean, I know change is hard, especially for folks who have been in IT. For many years, they love walking in the data center and feeling the hum of the servers and the blinking lights, and they don't want to change any of that. But the opportunity, like you said, if explained correctly, can be huge for not just for the company, but for their personal careers. So that's a great point. Paul, what did you do at your organization to, empower the staff to see this opportunity around the cloud?
Yeah, Jake, I couldn't agree more with all your points. And being early on a cloud adopter, you're talking about back in 2015, where there's virtually little to no documentation, reference architecture. It was very hard in the early beginning, and now there's just abundant amount of resources. But from a being a technologist, and what I like to tell people and teams and engineers is that, hey, you don't have to be the person who has to go in and physically touch things anymore. Those are the boring stuff, right? That's the mundane, replacing hardware and racking and stacking. Well, now you have so much opportunity, to your point, to go and do other things. Maybe you have personal pet projects that you want to try and learn about and do things in the cloud. Really, I think about cloud as just a big Lego set, right? There's all these pieces, and the world is your oyster, and you can have the opportunity to build whatever you want to.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. What if you could have just one Lego set in your on-premises data center, or you could have like the ultimate, universe of Legos. So great analogy there, because I love Legos. So let's share the results of this poll here. Primary workloads, 48%, data protection, databases, IT apps like CRM and ERP. Those were kind of the top respondents to this poll. And that brings us to our next question here, which is around architecting for the cloud. And I'm sure this is something we could talk about for a whole other hour. But Jake, I guess let's start with you. What do folks need to do or know about, automation and infrastructure as code? I know infrastructure as code is a passion of yours.
Yeah, and I'll try to keep this brief. I know we're short on time here, but definitely, infrastructure as code is one of those ways. I mean, if you adopt infrastructure as code, you get so many more benefits. I liken it to having blueprints for your buildings, right? You don't build a building without a blueprint, right? So infrastructure as code is kind of like a self-documenting way of building things, and there's a learning curve to it, and I think that a lot of organizations off the bat are not going to be ready for it. And I know it was a big leap for us to do that. But once you have those building blocks and you have those blueprints, like I said, it's great for disaster recovery because you can put those blueprints, in a safe somewhere. You can replicate them to other regions within AWS and with less effort, have DR environments available. But also it ensures consistency and high quality of your systems, right? So what I would do is I would have like my most senior folks write like CloudFormation templates for infrastructure as code, and then I would allow the more junior members take components of that, like the Lego pieces, and put them together. And in that way, I was able to ensure very high quality of the systems that were built, but allow everyone to contribute to that building.
Yeah, I love that. I love that blueprint analogy there. Paul, what about governance around cloud? Is it more important to have governance once you move applications to the cloud?
Yeah, I think governance is a huge part of adopting the cloud, right? We talk about VM sprawl back when we have our on-premise data center. Well, now you multiply that exponentially times 10 when you move to cloud services, because now you can turn anything on and off like a light switch. And so when it comes to governance, one of the things is, having a framework on how you deploy, manage, tag resources, such that everyone's on an equal level playing field when you're trying to identify, what are these EC2 instances doing? What are we using these databases for? And so, the more and larger as your team grows, the more it will become a problem if you don't have a strong governance model, especially when it comes to cloud sprawl and then even cost. Everybody thinks about cost is automatically cheaper when you go to the cloud, but that can be quite the contrary to that, because everyone's turning things on and off and you're consuming it at will. And so it's very important to do a strong governance model. And then even when it comes to security as well, everybody thinks that the cloud is naturally secure, when indeed it's more of a shared type of model and shared responsibility type model, which I believe Jake is very familiar with.
Yeah, Jake, why don't you tell us a little bit about the shared responsibility model? What do folks need to know about that? Because we can't just put our data into the cloud and just assume that it's it's inherently secure.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, it is. What the shared responsibility model is it's really, and I encourage folks to Google that or check it out on the AWS website, because there's a great infographic that kind of visually shows. But if you can imagine all the layers of the stack, with kind of data center being at the bottom and your application being at the top, we draw a line through it somewhere in the middle and say everything below that line is in the cloud, and it's AWS's responsibility. So we say that's the security and compliance of the cloud. And that's something that we take care of for you once you're in the cloud. So roughly half the things that you had to worry about from a security and compliance standpoint, and actually operational standpoint for that matter, is taken care of, and it's operated at a very high level, right? We have some of the biggest companies in the world are our customers, including Amazon.com, right? So we put a lot of effort into those things, and you get to benefit. Even if you're a one-person company, you can benefit from those, that economy of scale and experience that we have. But that leaves the above the line, and those things you're still responsible for, namely your applications that you run, and your own code and that sort of thing. But the great thing about the shared responsibility model is, because we're taking so many things off of your plate, you can concentrate your efforts on those things. So say you kept your headcount flat, you didn't do a reduction in headcount or increase in headcount. And let's say that we take about half of the things off the table that you have to worry about. Now you can kind of double the amount of effort that goes into what you are responsible for, which is a huge advantage. But not only that, you have all the, like I said, the tools, the 200 plus services that we offer, and many of them are security tools, to address those things that you're still responsible for. So you get even more of a force multiplier. So I think that the shared responsibility model, once understood, allows customers to have vastly better security and compliance in the cloud than they were ever able to achieve on premise. It's just a model that works very well.
Absolutely, yeah. For anyone moving, to the cloud, they need to familiarize themselves with exactly how that works and the benefits, like you said, of it. I brought up a poll question out here. Let me go ahead and share the results of this one, and we can chat about this. It looks like 69% said a mixture of both legacy and modern applications. They either run in the cloud now or they plan to run. Paul, what have you seen, at your organization? What kind of apps do you run in the cloud or plan to run?
It's definitely a mixture of both. And it always, for me, in my experience, it always started with the legacy and monolithic apps. And then as you get more familiar with, the tools and the expertise, and the team gets up to speed, then it's about, how can we leverage cloud even more with the just abundant variety of tools and services. I think it'll always be a mixture of both. I don't think that's going to ever change, just from my perspective.
Okay. And Jake, do you see customers moving, legacy monolithic applications, or, what percentage roughly, or how many of those are refactored before they're moved?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what type of customer it is. So like our large enterprise customers and public sector customers are almost all legacy, as you can imagine. And then, the startups, they're going to be more towards modern and cloud native. And large technology companies will also be more modern, especially, and also cloud native. So it really depends on the customer. There's definitely a bifurcation in this particular area. But yeah, vast majority are both. Enterprises, especially as time goes on, are building more and more new applications in the cloud for the reasons that we talked about before, the benefits, especially with getting started, right? I mean, a lot of companies are going from like a 6-month SLA in IT to spin up a proof of concept to, a day or two, which is just an amazing game changer. And then in terms of experimentation, you can get started, like I said, at any time, and you can have multiple experiments running. So building new in the cloud is definitely advantageous, even if you have legacy applications. So I'm not surprised to see that majority of our audience has both.
Yeah, absolutely. I love to hear those just amazingly short time frames. Just go and click and spin up that application today, because I remember the days of, well, it's going to take a month or two to get that server in the data center before we can do anything. So anyway, back to the poll question that's on the screen. I just brought up for anyone out there, what additional information would you like about the Rubrik and the AWS solution that we talked about today? I'll leave that up while we have maybe just a time for a couple of quick questions here from the audience. Let's see, there is a question here. They're asking, if you have any advice on compatibility between on-prem and cloud, images. For example, if you're migrating to the cloud, what sort of conversion or changes have to be made? For example, I'm envisioning maybe a virtual machine that's running on-prem. They want to run it into the cloud. How do you get that VM up into the cloud and run it? Jake, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so this was something that, again, when I did it, it was in the Stone Age, but we still had quite a few tools available to us, a few from AWS partners, and a few AWS native tools. I remember even we would just export VMware images and then convert them to AMIs for AWS. So even in 2016, that was available. Nowadays, things have gotten a lot better. They're so much easier. I mean, we have a service through a company we acquired, Cloud Endure, that kind of just makes it a click of a button. We have a whole team at AWS that's here to help customers do that. So a little bit too much to answer in the small amount of time we have, except to say that it should be relatively easy nowadays, and we're more than happy to help.
Excellent. What about, Richard is asking about any experience in minimizing disruption during a cloud migration. Paul, do you have any experience in that area or advice?
Yeah, in terms of minimizing disruption, you want to build any type of, if you're doing a lift and shift or however you want to do your migration. The beauty of the cloud is, you can spin it up and test it, right? Test the heck out of it, get your teams to QA it, get other people in the organization to make sure the applications are working. And then it's just a simple DNS change if it's hosted externally, right? Set your DNS record, your TTL is really short. And within 15 minutes, you can fail over and fail back if you find something that's wrong. So it's very easy nowadays with tools and maybe even using AWS Route 53 to help with that as well. There's so many tools to do it.
Yeah, excellent. We've got a lot of great questions out here. I'm afraid we're not going to have time to get to all these, but we've just got a couple minutes left. And in that time, I just want to remind everyone, of course, to respond there to the poll. We do appreciate your feedback on that. And, most importantly, I want to thank our experts on the event today, Jake from AWS and Paul from the Olympic Club. It's been great having you on. I really appreciate all your expert advice and wisdom on this topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. It was great being here. Thank you for moderating.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, Jake.
Thank you both. And thank you to everyone out there in the audience who joined us on the event today. I want to remind you to check out the handouts tab. There are additional resources on today's topic that you need to be aware of and download before you go. And finally, I'm going to go ahead and announce the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card. This is going out to Clayton Overstreet from Colorado. Congratulations, Clayton Overstreet. We will reach out to you with that prize and also reach out to our best question winner as well. Before you go, don't forget about the poll there on the screen. We appreciate your feedback and have a great day.